A world-class maestro challenged Maid's daughter. Her performance stilled the hall. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was a grand evening in the heart of New York City. The concert hall was filled with the elegant hum of conversation, the air heavy with the fragrance of expensive perfumes and the quiet rustle of evening gowns and tuxedos. Guests, some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the world, had gathered to witness a performance like no other. At the center of it all was a world-class maestro, known for his brilliance, his precision, and his almost godlike command over the orchestra. He was about to put his skills to the test in front of an eager audience, expecting nothing less than perfection. But what no one knew, what no one could have predicted, was that a young girl, a maid's daughter, would soon steal the spotlight. Amelia, just 12 years old, stood nervously backstage. In his ability to command the room, his reputation preceded him, and the audience was eager to be swept away by the magic of his music. Amelia, however, was not part of this world. She stood in the shadows, waiting for the night to pass, hoping her mother would be done with her duties so they could leave. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The maestro, spotting Amelia in the corner of the room, had a thought. He was always looking for challenges, always seeking something more to prove. He turned to his assistant and said, "Let's see if this young girl has any musical talent. If she can play, I'll give her a chance to perform." It was a joke, of course. The maestro had no idea who this child was, nor did he care. She was just another face in the crowd. But for Amelia, it was a moment of reckoning. She had played the piano since she was 5, her mother having saved up for lessons. Though she had never been given the opportunity to showcase her skills, Amelia had become a virtuoso, able to play pieces that stunned even the most seasoned musicians. Now, standing in the spotlight, with the maestro's words hanging in the air, Amelia felt a strange calmness. She stepped forward, her small fingers trembling only slightly as she approached the grand piano. The audience was watching, some curious, others amused, but none expecting what would come next. With a deep breath, Amelia placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The room fell silent as the first notes rang out, delicate yet powerful. The maestro, who had expected a simple display of amateur skill, was taken aback. Each note, each chord, seemed to carry an energy that no one could have anticipated. The sound filled the hall, not just with music, but with emotion, with passion. As Amelia played, the audience felt the air change, the weight of her music settling over them like a warm, enveloping blanket. They were no longer just listening. They were experiencing something deeper. The maestro, who had watched with the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable, stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. The performance was not just good, it was transcendent. Amelia, the maid's daughter, was playing with the kind of soul and skill that could only come from a place beyond the ordinary. The audience, stunned into silence, could not take their eyes off of her. This young girl, who had been dismissed as invisible just moments before, was now the center of attention, her music filling the hall with such intensity that it brought tears to the eyes of even the hardest critics. As the last note reverberated in the air, the silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. They simply sat in awe, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Amelia, a moment that would forever change not just her life, but the perception of everyone who had doubted her. The maestro stood still, his mind racing as the last notes of Amelia's performance echoed in the vast concert hall. He had never anticipated such a display of talent from a young girl, someone he had dismissed as nothing more than the daughter of a maid. His eyes, wide with disbelief, slowly turned to the audience, who were still frozen in their seats, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The music, which had once seemed like a mere challenge to amuse the maestro, now held the room captive. The usual air of arrogance and superiority that the maestro carried with him seemed to dissipate in an instant, replaced by a rare vulnerability. Amelia, for her part, had no idea how much she had just changed the entire atmosphere. She had always played music for herself, to escape the world around her, but now, in front of hundreds, it was clear that her gift had the power to move others, to transform a space filled with the world's elite. Her hands still hovered over the piano keys, her fingers trembling ever so slightly, but the moment the music stopped, she became aware of the weight of the silence that had followed. It was not uncomfortable, though. It felt different, almost like a quiet respect. Amelia turned toward the maestro, her face a mixture of fear and determination. She had expected to be ridiculed, to be told that she was not good enough, but the expression on his face now told a completely different story. The maestro blinked several times before he took a deep breath, as if trying to gather himself. Slowly, he stepped forward, his footsteps soft against the plush carpet of the stage. He reached out a hand, almost as if unsure whether or not to touch her. I did not expect that, he said, his voice slightly cracked. Amelia, still nervous, met his gaze but said nothing. The audience, still in stunned silence, waited for what would happen next. The maestro, clearly at a loss for words, took another step closer and finally spoke again, this time with more conviction. You have a gift, a talent that far surpasses what I could have imagined. I am ashamed to have doubted you. His words, though simple, were heavy with sincerity. The audience, who had expected nothing less than perfection from the maestro, now saw him for what he truly was. Just a man who had underestimated the power of raw, unrefined talent. Amelia felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of validation that she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not just as a maid's daughter, but as someone worthy of respect and recognition. The maestro's words were the first step, but the ripple of change would spread far beyond this room. The people in the audience, many of whom had seen her as nothing more than a servant, began to shift in their seats, their expressions slowly changing. Some looked at her with newfound admiration, while others looked down in shame at their previous judgments. The maestro, still processing the impact of Amelia's performance, nodded slowly. You should have the chance to perform again, he said. This time, it will be in front of a much larger audience. I will personally ensure that you get the recognition you deserve. Amelia's heart raced at the thought. She had never dreamed of such an opportunity, let alone to perform on such a grand stage. But in that moment, she realized that her life had changed forever. The girl who had once been invisible, the girl who had been cast aside by society, was now standing in front of a man who had recognized her true worth. The world, as it often does, had underestimated her, but she had proven them wrong. As the audience began to stir, applauding softly at first, then growing into a thunderous ovation, Amelia stood tall, her head held high. The sound of applause, of approval, of recognition, was unlike anything she had ever known. It was a moment of triumph, not just for Amelia, but for anyone who had ever been told they were not enough. This was only the beginning of her journey, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. The applause continued, the sound filling the hall with an energy Amelia had never experienced before. The maestro stepped back, allowing the audience to savor the moment, but his mind was already racing. He had seen talent, true talent, in many forms throughout his career, but what Amelia had just displayed was beyond anything he had ever encountered. He had expected a performance from a maid's daughter, something decent but ordinary, but what he had witnessed was extraordinary, a raw brilliance that could not be ignored. Amelia, standing there on stage, tried to keep her composure. The applause was overwhelming, but she could barely process it. All she had ever wanted was a chance to show what she could do, to prove that she was more than just a servant's daughter. Now, the world was seeing her for the first time. It felt surreal. As the last echoes of the applause faded, the maestro turned to the audience, his voice loud and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have just witnessed something truly remarkable. This young girl, Amelia, has not only played beautifully, she has shown us all the power of music, the power of art, to transcend boundaries. The crowd erupted once more in applause, but this time, it wasn't just polite clapping. It was a genuine recognition of the brilliance they had just witnessed. Amelia stood there, humbled by the praise, but inside, she was overwhelmed. She had never imagined this moment would come so suddenly. The maestro walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have a gift, Amelia. I want to offer you something that could change your life. I want to personally arrange for you to perform in front of a much larger audience. There is a concert in Paris next month, and I believe you are the one who should be playing." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Paris, the city of lights, the place where dreams could come true. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Was this real? The maestro continued, "This is your opportunity. You have proven yourself tonight, and I want the world to hear you." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. She had never dared to dream this big. She had always been told that her place was in the background, never to be seen or heard. But now, she was being given a chance to step into the spotlight. As she nodded silently, the maestro turned to the rest of the audience. "We will all be watching closely, Amelia. I have no doubt that you will rise to the occasion." The crowd, who had once doubted her, now looked at her with admiration, with respect. For Amelia, the world had shifted in an instant. She was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was a young artist with the potential to change the world. That night, as she walked off the stage, she could feel the weight of what had just happened settling in. Her mother was waiting for her backstage, her face filled with pride and amazement. Amelia rushed to her, hugging her tightly. "Mom, do you believe it? I'm going to Paris." Her mother, tears in her eyes, nodded. "I always knew you were destined for something great, Amelia." It was then that Amelia realized that her journey had only just begun. This was the first step towards something bigger, something greater than she had ever imagined. And as she stood there, holding her mother in her arms, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The applause, the maestro's offer, and the promise of a new life were all just the beginning. Amelia was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she had earned it, knowing that her talent had finally been recognized. Amelia's flight to Paris was a whirlwind. What had once seemed like a distant dream was now her reality. And as she looked out the small airplane window, the sprawling city below looked like something out of a storybook. She had come a long way from the quiet, dusty corners of her mother's employer's mansion. Now, she was on the verge of something far greater, something that could change her life forever. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear in equal measure. In just a few hours, she would be standing in front of a crowd that included some of the most famous and powerful people in the world. Amelia had always played piano for herself, to escape the chaos of her life, but now, she was about to perform. In front of a global audience. The city of Paris, with its rich history and dazzling lights, was alive with possibility. She could hardly believe it. She had spent most of her life invisible to the world, but now, she was being thrust into the spotlight. As the plane landed and the airport buzzed with activity, Amelia's excitement was palpable. The maestro had arranged everything, her accommodations, her rehearsal schedule, and even the choice of pieces she would perform. She couldn't help but feel both grateful and overwhelmed. This was her chance, but with it came an enormous amount of pressure. What if she failed? What if, despite all the recognition she had received, she wasn't good enough? Her mind raced with these questions as she took a taxi to the hotel. The city around her was a blur, the lights of Paris casting a golden glow on the streets as they passed by. When she arrived at the hotel, it felt like a dream. The lobby was grand, with marble floors and chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. She was led to a luxurious room that had a view of the Eiffel Tower. The opulence of it all made her feel like she didn't belong, but she quickly reminded herself that she had earned this. She had proven herself, and now she had to trust in her talent. The next day, she was taken to the concert hall for her first rehearsal. The hall was even more breathtaking in person, with towering columns and velvet-lined seats that stretched as far as the eye could see. The maestro greeted her with a warm smile, his usual formality softened by the excitement of her arrival. "Amelia, it's good to see you," he said. "We've been waiting for this moment. I know you're ready." Amelia nodded, though her nerves were still tightly wound. She stepped onto the stage, feeling the weight of the spotlight as it bathed her in light. The orchestra was already in place, their instruments tuning in the background. She took a deep breath and began to play. The sound of her piano, clear and pure, filled the hall. The musicians followed her lead, and soon, the entire orchestra was in harmony with her. As the rehearsal progressed, Amelia began to feel more comfortable. Her hands no longer shook as they had during her first performance. She was finding her rhythm, and with each note, she felt more at home. The maestro watched from the sidelines, a look of pride on his face. This was the same girl who had once been dismissed by the world, but now, she was creating something beautiful. By the time the rehearsal ended, Amelia was exhausted but exhilarated. She had faced her fears and proved to herself that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. That night, as she lay in her hotel room, she thought about her journey. She had come so far from the quiet girl who played alone in the shadows. Tomorrow, she would step onto the stage once again, but this time, she would do so with the confidence of someone who knew her worth. She wasn't just the maid's daughter anymore. She was an artist, a performer, and the world was finally ready to see her shine. The night of the performance in Paris had arrived. The concert hall was brimming with anticipation, the kind that you could almost touch in the air. The lights were dimmed, and the audience, composed of distinguished figures from all over the world, sat in rapt silence, eagerly waiting for the first note to echo through the room. Amelia stood backstage, her heart racing as she peered out from behind the curtains. The dazzling lights, the grand stage, the sea of faces, everything felt unreal. But in that moment, she remembered the maestro's words. "You've already proven yourself. Now just play like you always do." She nodded to herself, taking a deep breath. This was her moment. This was the moment she had dreamed of, worked for, and earned. The piano was waiting for her. As the curtain rose, a wave of applause cascaded over the room. Amelia stepped onto the stage, feeling every step reverberate through the floor beneath her. The orchestra was already in place, their instruments tuned and ready, the conductor's baton poised in the air. Amelia's hands began to sweat, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had been in this moment before, just not on this grand of a scale. She had played for her mother, she had played for herself, but now, she was playing for the world. The maestro gave her a reassuring nod. The first few chords echoed through the hall, and just like that, the magic began. The music flowed from her fingers effortlessly, every note precise, every chord resonating with the emotions she had carried for so long. She was no longer the maid's daughter. She was an artist, a creator. As her hands danced over the keys, she felt the tension in the room dissolve. The audience was captivated, drawn into the world she had created with nothing but the power of music. She could feel their eyes on her, their attention fixed on every movement, every sound. For the first time in her life, Amelia felt truly seen. As the music built, crescendoing with intensity, she became lost in the rhythm, the melody, the beauty of the sound. She played not just for herself, not just for her mother, but for everyone who had ever doubted her, for everyone who had told her that she didn't belong in this world of power and prestige. She played for the girl she had once been, and the woman she had become. The final note rang out, its echo lingering in the air. For a moment, everything was still. The audience held their breath, unsure of what to do, stunned by the power of the performance they had just witnessed. And then, the applause began. It started slowly, hesitantly, but soon grew into a thunderous ovation. The sound filled the hall, reverberating off the walls, as if the music itself had reached into the hearts of every person in the room. Amelia stood there, breathless, her hands still resting on the piano keys. She couldn't believe it. She had done it. The crowd was on their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting her name. She had conquered the stage, and with it, the world had finally recognized her. The maestro stood beside her, his expression a mixture of pride and awe. He clapped his hands, a smile spreading across his face. "That was extraordinary, Amelia. You have a gift like no other." Amelia's heart swelled with emotion. She had always known she had something special inside of her, but now, the world knew too. The applause continued as she took her bow, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly soak in the moment. She had stepped into the light, and now, nothing would ever be the same again. The world had seen her, and it would never forget her. The days following Amelia's performance were a blur. The applause from the concert hall still echoed in her mind as she walked through the streets of Paris, her heart still racing from the thrill of the night. She had done it. She had stepped into the spotlight and conquered her fears. But now, as the reality of her success began to sink in, so did the pressure. The world was watching her, and with that came expectations. The maestro had promised her opportunities, and now, it was time to live up to them. Amelia knew that this was just the beginning. She had played in Paris, but she couldn't let herself be satisfied with that one success. She had to prove that she wasn't just a flash in the pan, that she could sustain this level of brilliance and take her place among the world's greatest musicians. As she sat in her hotel room, looking out at the Paris skyline, Amelia's thoughts drifted back to the days before her performance. Back to the times when she had played for herself, in the quiet corners of her home, just her and the piano. She missed those days, when her music was only for her, when the weight of the world's expectations hadn't yet settled on her shoulders. But now it was different. She had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The phone rang, snapping her out of her reverie. It was the maestro. "Amelia, I've just spoken with several of the top orchestras in the world. They are eager to see you perform. There are offers on the table." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the moment she had worked for. But at the same time, a wave of fear washed over her. Could she really handle this? Could she live up to the hype? The maestro seemed to sense her hesitation. "Listen to me, Amelia. I know this is overwhelming, but you've already shown the world what you can do. This is your time. Don't doubt yourself." Amelia nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I'll be ready," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure she believed it. "Good," he replied, his tone firm. "You have the talent, and now you have the opportunity. I'll make sure the world knows your name." After the call ended, Amelia sat back in her chair, staring out at the city below. Her dreams were coming true, but with that came a new kind of pressure. She had to prove that she was worthy of the opportunities she had been given. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of meetings, rehearsals, and press conferences. The media was eager to hear her story, and the world's top concert halls were eager to book her for performances. Amelia was being thrust into the limelight in a way she had never imagined, and while the attention was flattering, it also made her feel vulnerable. She missed the simplicity of her old life, the quiet moments with her mother. But now, there was no turning back. Her life had changed forever. The first concert following Paris was in New York City. As she stood backstage, waiting to take her place on stage, Amelia's nerves were on edge. The audience was a mix of critics, fans, and high-profile figures, all eager to see the Maid's daughter who had stunned the world. Amelia's heart raced as the curtain rose, and the spotlight once again found her. But this time, she was ready. She had proved to herself, and to the world, that she was more than just a girl with a piano. She was a force to be reckoned with, and tonight, she would show them all. Amelia stood backstage in New York, her heart racing. This was the biggest stage of her life. The concert hall, filled with some of the world's most prestigious guests, buzzed with excitement. Critics, investors, and the media were all there, eager to see the young prodigy who had taken the world by storm. The same overwhelming feeling she had experienced in Paris now returned in full force. But this time, she wasn't as nervous. She had already proven herself once. She knew she could do it again. The lights dimmed, and the audience went silent. It was time. As Amelia stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit her like a wave of heat. The room felt both enormous and intimate, as if every eye was on her. The orchestra was waiting, the conductor standing at the ready. Amelia's fingers hovered over the piano keys. The crowd held its breath, waiting for her to play. She could feel the weight of their expectations, but for the first time, it didn't scare her. She had earned this moment, and she wasn't going to let fear take it away from. Become synonymous with brilliance, and her performances were sold out in concert halls around the world. She traveled from one city to the next, leaving audiences awestruck by her virtuosity and the depth of emotion in her music. The world that had once seemed so distant, so out of reach, was now her stage, and she had stepped onto it with the grace and power of someone who belonged there. Despite her success, Amelia had not forgotten her roots. She had risen from humble beginnings, and that truth remained etched in her heart. She made sure to visit her mother whenever she could, bringing her small tokens of the life they now shared, the life they had both dreamed of but never imagined would come to fruition. Yet, with every performance, there was a nagging feeling in the back of Amelia's mind, a fear that, despite everything she had achieved, she might still be seen as the maid's daughter in the eyes of some. She had conquered the stage, but could she ever truly shake the label that had once defined her? During a performance in London, after her final piece, as the applause rang through the theater, Amelia made her way backstage, her heart still pounding from the energy of the performance. She was met by the maestro, who was waiting for her with a wide smile. "You were magnificent, Amelia," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've done something few others can. You've shown the world that talent isn't about where you come from. It's about what you can do." Amelia smiled, but she didn't feel the same certainty that he did. She had worked so hard to prove that she was more than just her background. But sometimes, despite all the success, she still felt like she was trying to convince the world of her worth. The maestro seemed to sense her doubt. "Amelia, I know what you're thinking," he continued, his tone softening. "You've earned this. You've proven yourself not just through your music, but through your perseverance. The world may have its judgments, but none of them matter when you're on that stage." Amelia nodded, though the feeling inside her lingered. She was grateful for the maestro's belief in her, but part of her longed for the validation that only time would bring. Her next performance was in Vienna, one of the most prestigious cities in the world for classical music. The stakes felt even higher, and Amelia knew that this performance would be different. As she prepared backstage, she felt the familiar rush of excitement mixed with nerves. This was a city where the greatest musicians had performed, where legends were born. The audience would expect nothing less than perfection. The moment she stepped onto the stage, the grandeur of the venue hit her. The vast hall, the elegant architecture, and the sea of faces staring at her. It was enough to make anyone feel small. But Amelia wasn't small anymore. She had earned her place, and she would prove it again tonight. The lights dimmed, and the orchestra played the first notes, signaling her entry. Amelia's fingers moved with precision, the music flowing from her with effortless grace. As she played, she felt herself immersed in the familiar embrace of the music, letting go of all the doubts and insecurities that had plagued her. The audience was silent, hanging on every note. This was her moment, her chance to show the world once again that she was more than just a girl with a piano. By the end of the performance, as the final notes resonated through the hall, Amelia knew that she had given everything she had. The applause that followed was deafening, but it wasn't the applause that mattered most. It was the feeling of finally being at peace with herself, of knowing that she had earned her place in the world of music. That night, as she stood backstage, the maestro smiled at her once again. "You did it, Amelia," he said. "You've shown them all." Amelia smiled back, but now, it was a smile of contentment. She had nothing left to prove. She had already proven it to herself. Amelia's journey had come full circle. She was no longer the quiet, overlooked girl who had once played piano in the corners of her home. She was now a celebrated artist, her name known across the world, and the music she had once played for herself was now heard by thousands. Yet, as the years passed, one thing remained constant: her love for the piano, for the music that had always been her sanctuary. She had performed on the world's biggest stages, traveled to the finest concert halls, and had even earned the respect of the greatest musicians in the industry.